welcome to Frankly Speaking with Sendra D, where we dive deeply and help you wake up to the essence of what it means to live a real, authentic, affluent life. Beyond the balance sheets, the bank accounts, the private jets, the political offices, into the realm of inner wealth and personal power. I'm Sandra D, your companion guide on this trajectory of truthful self-mastery as we celebrate your individuality and your sovereignty. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Frankly Speaking with Sendra D podcast. My name is Sendra D. As you know, I try to bring you the very best of the world, of humanity. And of course, you know, I strive to be one of those people that leave you better than how I found you. So that said, today I bring to you a world-renowned, one of my favorite people. And of course, you know, as a podcaster, I watch other podcasters and I watch other shows. And so that's how I came across my guest. Matthew Ehret is from Montreal, Canada. For those of my fellow Patriot Haitians, he speaks probably Joual. Do you speak Joual? Do you?
Je peux débrouiller un petit peu en français si on veut.
Is that
It's
even
possible.
a language?
Yeah, it's a language. It's a weird. Yeah, it's in the rural Quebec.
Oh my goodness, I'm kidding, of course. Well, welcome, Matthew. And so what I'm going to do, and because there's such a long resume for Matthew, he is a journalist and he's passionate about history and also passionate about Haiti. Today, we're not going to deep dive into Haiti, but we are going to ask Matthew, first of all, for him to tell you who he is and how did he get here and what keeps him here. So Matthew, welcome. And would you like to tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what brought you to this forum, this conversation of world politics and, you know, all things history?
Yeah, sure, and it's my pleasure, and I'm really honored to be joining you today and your audience. I guess for myself, I wear a few hats. One of them has increasingly had the name historian on it, but it wasn't something I'd ever intended to get into. I was not trained in history in school. I was more in the arts, illustration, and things of that sort. Film animation was my passion, and I found myself back in 2004 or so. Like so many people, everyone has their own experience. For me, it was beginning to look into 9/11 that caused me to realize that the official narratives were more than a few holes that were designed to deflect attention away from the real culprits behind 9/11 that had nothing to do with some guy in a cave in Afghanistan, which had actually zero to do with the thing, and it had everything to do with something that had begun to take over the United States, I would say, really after the murder of JFK. But even you could go back to the murder of Abraham Lincoln and find that the institutions that were built up 150 years ago, 250 years ago even. So you have this deep state structure, this shadow government structure that has at different periods in history slightly different brands to it, but it's the same institutions that were set up like Wall Street, like the Skull and Bone Society, like a variety of things that created the CIA out of the Scottish Rite that created the FBI before World War I, that created the CIA after World War II as an outgrowth of an Anglo-American integrated machinery that was designed to abolish the better traditions of America, which were premised, those better traditions I'm referring to are the anti-imperial traditions of those great presidents who tended to get killed while in office, and there were 8 presidents who died while in office, which is an extremely high number for such a young country.
Haiti's competing with the U.S. as far as presidents dying in office, being murdered too, right? Being murdered.
Well, that's the thing, right? So these anomalies, when you start scratching the surface of official narratives, you build up more of an awareness about the deep structures of shadow government politics behind the scenes that have been behind a lot of these things, whether it's assassinations, overthrows, coups, many revolutions, color revolutions. You start seeing that there's a different story, which for me in 2004, I took very seriously, and it was a bit traumatic, and I basically came to the conclusion that all of the social contracts I thought I had with my society were null and void, because it was all based upon a very fictitious idea of what the world was that I was going into. And I said, oh, well, I have to start taking my life much more seriously if everything is a lie designed to bring us to a very bad place. And so I realized that I have to learn how to understand in such a deep manner that I can communicate intelligibly these things to other minds. Otherwise, it would be useless to try to talk about things I don't fully understand. I would look like a tinfoil hat wearing kook. So I decided to just put myself on a rigorous path of research, which went on for a couple of years. I found myself building up my capacities, working with the Schiller Institute for about a decade. I was a volunteer full time, which gave me I think a certain sense of interacting with diplomats, building conferences in Ottawa, in Washington. That gave me a sensitivity to
So, I
what
mean,
is
can you give me the time frame for that, that date, as far as when you were interacting with these governments in
Yeah,
Washington?
I began working with the Schiller Institute, which was an organization set up by Lyndon LaRouche. It was
Yes.
already about 40 years old when I joined it. It was set up in the early 70s, and that was 2006, and I was with that organization till about 2016. And one of the earliest things that I was a part of, well, I was basically challenged to go down to Washington, D.C., where the organization was lobbying congressmen and senators around, at the time it was fighting for a second Oslo Accord in
Hmm.
2006. That was something that Yossi Beilin, the former defense minister or foreign minister of Israel, was calling for, an Oslo Accord being the program that was attempted by Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin in 1993 to create a two-state solution in the Middle East, or the infiltration of the Muslim Brotherhood as well as Hamas as an outgrowth that subverted the Yasser Arafat PLO orientation towards economic development. Very mature thinking that was all sabotaged
Because
and was
Hamas was
sabotaged.
created as an opposition to the PLO.
It was,
And
yeah, in '87.
some
That's
would
right.
say, I don't want to incriminate myself, some would say that it was a creation of Israel.
Well, amongst those some, you would have people like Chaz Freeman, the former ambassador to Saudi Arabia from the United States. Senator Ron Paul, when he was a senator,
Mhm.
was also one of those people who documented this quite well, and very high members within Israeli's security establishment even openly have Ehud Barak has even
Mhm.
described this as well. People can go and listen to speeches by Netanyahu himself, saying that if we want to have superiority over the Palestinians, we have to do everything to ensure that Hamas remains the dominant voice of the Palestinians in Gaza.
The
Yeah.
arrogance is unprecedented.
Yes. So for me, it was something that was a stressor for me, like the question of, is this a resolvable crisis or is this something that has no solution except total war? And so at the time, that was what the Schiller Institute was lobbying in Congress. And I found myself on, basically there was like 100 younger members who were brought to Washington for 2 weeks. I didn't know very much about, I was in a learning phase. I was watching other organizers who had more
Mhm.
experience speaking, going office to office. Everyone had a list of about 20 offices to go through to speak to congressional aides, chiefs of staff if possible. We spoke to a couple of congressmen to give them briefings, give them literature, and it gave me a sense, because I was at the time a little bit black-pilled. I'd been researching on my own the New World Order, a lot of these very disturbing facts of history that resulted in me becoming very cynical. I was of the view that, okay, if this has been around since the murder of, John F. Kennedy and longer, centuries, conspiracy, then I was thinking to myself, well, there's been no opposition. We're screwed. The New World Order, this idea of a depopulation agenda, is something that is not resistible. And I was becoming very dark. So it was a breath of fresh air for me to be challenged to get out of my ivory tower
Yeah.
armchair researcher thing in my, locked up in my house, and get into the real world, which is where I challenged myself to do that and see that, okay, these are actually, I spoke to Edward Kennedy, who's a corrupt person. He's not a good person, but I spoke to him about, and he shared with me, when we were on one of these
You're talking
diplomatic
about Teddy Kennedy, the
ventures.
alcoholic?
Yeah, the alcoholic who probably played a role in murdering his girlfriend. That guy. He's dead now. But at the time, this is 2006. He came across as somebody who was a human being. I could see, because I would interact with him and his chief of staff. I saw them. They were stressed. They were aware that the CIA killed his brothers. He was aware of that. He was somebody who made way too many compromises, but you could see that there was a human there to interface with. He was a reader of EIR, Executive Intelligence Review, which is the name of the publication of the Schiller Institute at the time of Lyndon LaRouche, and they would go out and we would hand out these EIR magazines, and so he was a reader of that thing. So it gave me a sense, okay, that there are human beings. It's not 100% as controlled as I thought it was. There's people, in a bad place trying to figure out how to do things, even though they've compromised. So anyway, it gave me a sense that there's something to hold on to, and we brought back some of that experience into Montreal, into Canada, and we hosted a big conference in 2007 where we brought together 30 ambassadors or embassy staff members, as well as about 4 members of parliament and 3 senators, who all came to our conference, which was a 2-day long event called Canada and the Coming Eurasian World. This is 2007. and I got to participate in building up that conference with a few other members of the Montreal bureau that I was involved with. And it was great. I mean, it really showcased two things. Number one, the inevitable breakdown of the transatlantic banking system and the potential for a new system that would be based upon a cooperative arrangement with Canada, the USA working with Eurasian nations
Mm-hmm.
that wanted to build infrastructure, that wanted to have a future to defend sovereignty. And a lot of engineers were brought in from different parts of the country, from Russia, from China, from Mexico, from the United States, were brought in to speak over these 2 days. So it was a very enriching thing. But I admit that at the time, I was still cynical because as many good ideas of history that I were inspiring to me, like what was the story of JFK's fight, what was his policy, what about Lincoln, what about McKinley. So I started getting a more beautiful tapestry of the drama shaping history, which was good for my soul. I
Mm-hmm.
still, looking at the world in 2007, it's still Dick Cheney Bush. I didn't see an end to the wars in Iraq. The Russia-China alliance was still quite weak. So I was still thinking to myself, well, it doesn't look like there's viable resistance to make these great ideas happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it was around 2013 that began to finally change as Xi Jinping came out for the first time in October, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe it was September of 2013, and announced the new Silk Road as the new basis of China's foreign policy. And I was thinking to myself at that point, well, that's real power projection for the first time, and it's not being done solo by China going at it alone, but what you saw immediately afterwards was an integration agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union
Mm-hmm.
in 2015. Russia, that's led by Russia. Then,
So
at that
I
same time,
wanna
you had,
I wanna get into the how these sort of different tentacles are sort of connected and interwoven. But I want to bring you back to a bit because we're
yeah,
gonna get into politics. But I wanted the audience to get to know you, Matt, and
yes,
as you are
right.
extremely well versed in geopolitics. But I wanted to let the audience know why I came to you. And one, it's in some of the podcasts that I've heard you be a guest on, I keep hearing you talk about Toussaint in Haiti, how Haiti's been destroyed. We're not going to get into that conversation, but in your research, I know that you've come across certain countries that even though they were not they were not a strong presence in the world, they were significant in the world, right? So Haiti was one of those countries that was tiny right now, population of 10 million, 11 million, maybe at the most 14. But you said one figure in your research, Toussaint. You say you came to know Toussaint a little bit through, researching the world and what their different leaders were in the world. Touch a little bit about the past and Toussaint, the role that he played, just for like 5-10 minutes, so we can, before we get into the geopolitics, the bigger picture as present day, because I know the Silk Road will lead us right to today. So go back to
Absolutely, yeah,
1804,
for
maybe
sure.
a little bit before then, to Toussaint before he died.
Yeah, 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 sure. And this comes out in my Clash of the Two Americas books, and I'm going to recommend as well
I will
at some
mention
point you
all your
speak
books.
to.
He's got lots of books. You better go buy
Okay,
them on
cool.
Amazon. This is,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
promotion time. Yes,
Cool.
after you watch the
And my
podcast.
friend Gerald, okay, cool. My friend Gerald Perrien, who's published 3 volumes so far of his own history series that I've helped him publish, he's gone through this in much greater detail. However, he'll come on. Yeah, okay, I'll make sure you guys get to talk. But yeah, definitely there is in the first volume of my untold history of, or sorry, the Clash of the Two Americas, that sort of showcases the two different opposing traditions within America, this deep state tradition going back to 1776, as well as this better tradition. The better version of America that's been destroyed, or at least undermined for centuries, and its best leaders have been mostly murdered while in office, have tended to have a foreign policy based upon assisting nations that have been suffering under the yoke of empire
Mhm.
to develop true sovereignty, independence, economic development, and there's been an idea of looking at the world from the standpoint of win-win cooperation. This is where you had, Russia, France, the best members of France, and there could honestly be a book series called the Clash of the Two Frances, because you've got this good pro-liberty French culture that
Mhm.
Charles de Gaulle came out of and represented. Colbert and Mazarin earlier on represented this better anti-oligarchical, anti-imperial French tradition. And then you have this other very evil satanic thing, which is also latched on like a parasite, pushing pro-slavery, human
Mhm.
exploitation empire, which has largely been represented by the Organisation de l'Armée Secrète that tried to kill de Gaulle 30 times, or that represented the worst elements of Napoleon and the Napoleonic striving towards world empire. So there's this other thing, and that's the way I try to look at any country, is the clash of these two identities. Now, in that context, the issue of Haiti came out as an anomaly, since Domingue is
Omega.
Domingue, yeah. Say that was the prior name, is for those who are not in Haiti who may not know that,
Mhm.
before Haiti was created as a republic. But it was the first republic after America to succeed, and I didn't know that. I found it very odd that of all the nations in the world, it failed in France. Aspirations to become a free republican nation in 1789 were
Mhm.
sabotaged by British Freemasonic operations, as well Swiss and agencies within France itself, obviously. That turned into a Jacobin bloodbath of bloody terror, of civil war for 4 or 5 years until Napoleon was brought in to fill the vacuum, financed by the Rothschilds, nominally an enemy, but not really. And that failed. And then the aspirations for other Republican movements in Spain, in Prussia, in Poland were all in Ireland were all sabotaged before 1799. So why would they all fail? Haiti was able to become a republic. And then looking into the story of Toussaint Louverture, it became clear to me that this man stood far above and beyond the quality of thinking and culture that I thought was possible at that time, and had deep interaction with people like John Adams, like Alexander Hamilton. A lot of the best of the American founding fathers were engaged in correspondences, even assisted Haiti in crafting the Haitian Constitution, which Alexander Hamilton took the lead in helping to shape the concept of a nation founded upon the general welfare and the consent of the governed, but designed and accommodated for the Haitian context. And Toussaint had so much working against him. He had operatives from the outside, from France, trying to work hard to destroy the ambition for a republic, but also from within. There were very corrupt agencies, a lot of voodoo cults that had been groomed by the Jesuits to
Love that. We're gonna have
subvert
to
and
do a separate
destroy.
show
Yeah.
about that. Voodoo and the Jesuits, but let's keep going. Toussaint, let's the Jesuits
Yeah.
and who was sabotaging him.
To keep it simple for now, he found himself at a certain point in a prison, unjustly accused of certain things, and a lot of his enemies ended up becoming. Unfortunately, they found themselves into power positions and undermined many of the positive developments that could have otherwise have happened. And I mean, Haiti is just it's something I haven't yet done a deep dive on, but I'm fascinated by the history, by the fight for independence at different times. I mean, recently the work of Frederick Douglass as well, who was a former slave who became an advisor to Abraham Lincoln and was made ambassador to Haiti from the United States. That Frederick Douglass is an incredible, powerful soul. And unfortunately, again, he underestimated the amount of malevolent intrigue that he was stepping into and failed to actualize, I guess you could say it that way, the type of positive vision for economic development and industrial development that he had hoped for with his patriotic allies within Haiti itself. They wanted to have industrial, advanced, modern society, but that required a supportive America that was not acting like an empire. And it's sad that so much of the time America has been the worst expression of itself. Usually after a great American
What we're
president
talking
is
about
murdered.
when we say America, we're talking about American government, because when
Government,
we
yeah.
talk about the different layers of American government, because it's the government that you see and there's a government that you don't see. Though the one you don't see is the most criminal and the most, and how can I say, dangerous, and we've seen this play out. So that's fantastic. And of course, I wanted the audience to get to know you as someone who is exposed to Haiti, because I've not really had any guests, in the last year who's touched on Haiti. But I wanted to bring you on because your interest in Haiti, and also because your clear-minded way of processing the facts, right? So because we don't want anyone who's going to be biased one way or the other. In this show, this is completely neutral, as of course I am a neutral professional, being a mediator, but I do bring the information that is completely neutral so that you can decide for yourself. I tell people, do your own research. I'm not here to convince anyone of your any political stance. Of course, I do like Donald Trump, and I'm like, but as we speak now, we are about to have, we can segue into that current day. So we know how it was in the past. Has anything changed? Nothing's changed. Human nature remains the same. You can go one way or the other. You can be for the force of good, or you can be for the force of evil. It's Star Wars here. I choose to be on the side of good. Who do you want to be on the side of? When I know when the end day comes, and there are some prophecies, I don't believe any of those things, but if it comes, I know I'm good with my maker. So that's why I do these podcasts, to bring to you information. And Matthew is one of those people that I find brings authentic, genuine, research, informed information, referenced information. I am not a historian. Maybe my daddy could have been a guest and tell you everything he knows about, but I'm I'm not that person, but I am passionate about certain things. One of the things that I'm most passionate about is the truth, without a doubt, unquestionably, non-negotiable. The truth. Just give me the truth and I'll decide for myself. So, Matthew, let's talk about the last 4 years. I'm gonna try not to interrupt it, but let's give some perspective. You're Canadian. You're looking at your country. We had COVID, right? We had COVID. We had Trump and Trudeau in office, and we don't even want to bring too much Trudeau because that would take like a 10-hour podcast. So we had Trudeau, and then with changing regards in the U.S., and we had. Oh, before that, you talked about the Silk Road Initiative because that coincided because if you remember, Gaddafi was killed in 2011 and Saddam was what, in 2003? So all these
Four, yeah, 3 or 4, yeah.
three. So all these, because what the power struggle was, who's going to be remaining? Because when they sort of eliminate their perceived enemies, they feel that the more they eliminate, the more powerful they become. But as they were busy eliminating enemies, another power emerged, and that was China. So 2013 is where you talked about the Silk Road. Can you take us back to the Silk Road and how we got to here with Trump and then to Biden? And then again, we'll get to Trump the next 4 years. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's, there was originally an idea that the plug could be pulled from the financial system and a controlled demolition of the bubbles that are our current economy internationally could be popped at the same time, with all nations suffering equally as order could be imposed out of the chaos of that crisis if we were all in the building together. If Russia, China, India, everybody, Europe, we're all in the same transatlantic dominated bubble building at the same time as the controlled demolition was sparked. And I think that it was a bit of a wake-up call. The level of obsession with never-ending wars culminating with an eventual war with Iran that was always one of the key objectives. It was never about specifically targeting the Muslim countries per se. It was about the broader context in which the Arab states existed, which
Right.
was the weakening and forever destabilizing of Eurasia as a whole. India, China, Russia being the three big powers that Zbigniew Brzezinski made the point in 1997 in an interview with a French magazine. I forget which the name of the magazine was, but he made the point that the only thing at this point that could challenge the end of history, which, the neocons and those who put both the neoliberals of the Clinton administration, the Strobe Talbots, Al Gore's, that whole nexus of Rhodes Scholars, as well as who are setting up the controlled opposition of the right neocon response, both of them playing sort of a left-hand, right-hand path together. They were both celebrating that it was the end of history, as Francis Fukuyama had said back in 1991 or 92. That with the Soviet Union collapsing, it's just now a matter of tying up loose ends and consolidating a new, like a one world empire, a new Roman Empire that does what the Roman Empire had failed to do. And part of that required subduing the entire Arab world, also supporting the growth of Greater Israel, which is what Paul Wolfowitz had put forth with the clean break doctrine in 1996 with the murder of Yitzhak Rabin and the sabotage of Oslo Accords. So clean break was a strategy for securing the realm, an official PNAC document that called for a new era of regime change for Israel to overthrow, with obviously support by the United States, to overthrow Saddam, Bashar or Syria. Libya was on the list, Lebanon, and of course Iran. I think there was I forget, one or two African nations on the list too, Sudan probably, but I forget. So all that to say, that was becoming now, the point was to stop what Zbigniew Brzezinski had warned of, which was the danger of a U.S., Russia, China, Iran alliance, which he said could be the only thing that the unlikely coalition of these three big powers representing three very diverse cultural blocks of humanity, that type of combined power could challenge the hegemony of the Anglo-American forever empire. But it became clearer and clearer in the minds of the intelligentsia representing the Russia and especially China that this was existential, and that everything going on leading up to the attack on Iran that was going to be imminent was going to result in the destruction of these ancient civilizational forces. And they began to think more seriously about survival. And coming out of that, I think that, you had not only things like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that was quickly set up in the year 2000, with India, China, and Russia as the backbone of what has grown now to be sort of a counter response to NATO. But also you had things like the Eurasian Economic Union. You had things like there's ASEAN kind of grew out of that too. But there's the G20 also was something that would give a voice, that would create the basis of a combined effort for representing power in opposition to this other very evil ancient thing in the West. So BRICS also came out of that around that time. South Africa joined it in 2010, I believe. And together it's still lacked form in 2008 when the economic crisis was being set. It lacked form. And I think that form, that important structure was presented with the Belt and Road Initiative that Xi Jinping had announced. And that began to be integrated with Russia, that began to be integrated with many of Russia's allies, with Iran soon, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization more broadly. So this is something which represents a very different paradigm. And we saw it grow all the way up until 2016 to 65 member countries that had signed on cooperative agreements to be a part of the Belt and Road in varying degrees, many of them in Africa, many of them in South America. Under Trump, who was I believe that the intention was for Hillary to become the president in 2016. I think
I have no idea how that happened. That was like, I was in shock. Knowing the Clintons, of course, I'm from Haiti, knowing the Clintons and how they operate, how did they let that one get away? But go ahead. I digress, but
I don't believe in QAnon. I think that is a government
I don't
psyop, or not a
either. I
government,
don't either. I don't. I think
yeah,
that was definitely a psyop. I have no interest in that. Give me facts.
yeah.
None of this, delusional thinking that somebody's going to come and rescue. Nobody's rescuing me. I believe in God. I believe in me taking care of my own business. But go, if that works for you, please feel free to continue to indulge
Well,
conspiracy theories. Here we deal with facts.
I have a lot of friends within the QAnon community that I get along with okay, and it's partially because we both believe that conspiracies happen for good and for bad, and good people also conspire. Now, to that degree that I believe that,
Philosophy
we get
about
along,
that.
we speak.
Oh, we
Yeah,
do. Yeah. But I do
yeah,
believe
that's
that
the thing. You
some
have an
people cannot face the real truth. When you said you had that moment where you have black pilled and you're like, oh my God, but then you have to make a shift. You have to decide, am I going to be depressed for the rest of my life? Or am I going to focus on the solution and what I can control? And I talk about the serenity prayer all the time and say, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know different. Let me know what I can do. So when these people are focused on something outside of themselves, which is not God, which is something that is completely devoid of any truth-based structure, right? It's just hopium. They're like the white hats, this and that. I mean, you do want to believe in something like that, right? At some point you wake up, you're like, well, that's not happening. It's been a month, 2, 3 years, not happening. But you know what? It's because, Matt, I do believe they're afraid of the pain that comes from having believed in it for so long. They can't face the reality. I've been scammed. I have to wake up to the fact that I have been scammed and psyoped. I believed it, but that's okay. Now I'm waking up. Let me move forward. But they won't move. They stay frozen in that belief that it's going to happen. Something like those white hats, the military, the underground. That's too much for me. Maybe I'm the one that's delusional, but I sleep at night. But go ahead. I digress.
No. It's well said. And I think that there's two sort of extremes that both get. Extremes are never good. And either people think of Trump as the Antichrist or as the Messiah. And I think both extremes are wrong. At the end of the day, I think of Trump as a pragmatist who recognizes that making business is better than World War III, that World War III or population reduction under some Green New Deal is terrible business right. sense. It would create more instability.
As well.
Yeah. So this idea of like, what is America first? What is it to think about our true national self-interest as from the standpoint of doing business is a competent way to think about just negotiations, building up policies and strategies for the future. And I think that you have a big chunk of the business community who came to recognize more and more that the system itself was wired to be demolished. It's a time bomb. It's not really a banking system anymore.
It's a house of cards.
It's a house of cards.
It's on
and
sale.
Under the new, when you read, and you read the transcripts of the speeches of Mark Carney's or Klaus Schwab's or many of those who are trying to control the new system that they want to bring online, it becomes very clear that this green anti-carbon new system that they want to create has no place for a wide spectrum.
I'm a banker. It's capitalism. But the thing is, I'll just point this out to the audience, and you've heard me say this in my other podcast, how anybody can take anything that comes out of that man seriously. Klaus Schwab, he is a caricature from like Austin Powell, as far as I'm concerned. He is bizarre. I mean, you could see the way first of all, he dresses up like he's some Dr. Evil. How do you take him seriously? He sounds scripted. He's out to demolish the world. I don't understand. Where's the emotional intelligence in humanity to say this man has no place in the conversation? But it seems to be he's dominant, and also no, what's his sidekick? His Harari.
Yuval Harari.
Both these men, how are they even being put on pedestal? I don't get it. What am I missing?
Part of it is that I think there's a bit of theater here. Like they are assigned to play the role of hate absorbers. So part of what they're doing they're cutouts. They're not the creators of the policies that they are instruments of advancing. I think that they're given certain
like Obama.
Assignments, whether they know it or not. They probably are not even aware
like
of
Obama,
how they're being used.
Was.
I mean, exactly. I think Obama really was a giant ego who thought he was really awesome and I don't think he had an appreciation for how his words were controlled, scripted. His policies didn't come from him, but he was so not self-aware that he had no idea of how he was a puppet. I feel like something is similar for the case of Klaus or especially Yuval Noah Harari, but they do by saying the most. And our prime minister, yeah, I mean the guy's like a younger version of Joe Biden, you know.
So cute, Trudeau. He's like, he's like the boy that next door that grew up, and you're like, oh, look at him, he's all grown up now. He baffles me.
Yeah,
he's always up to no good. He's like mischief. Dennis getting in trouble again. Well, like, what did Trudeau do now? But go ahead, I keep interrupting. But
no, it's true.
Talking about I mean, the different, entities that were just, the global plan with the Green New Deal, and you were talking about Klaus.
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So I think
they're funny, but go ahead.
No, it's good. Digressions I love digressions. I'm a fan of them. But yeah, that's why I think that a big chunk of the business community, the oil companies, the construction companies that would have no place in like Mark Carney gave a speech called 50 Shades of Green in 2019 at a Jackson Hole central bankers conference when he was still governor of the Bank of England. He's sort of the eco warrior of central banks. I think he's being set up to become the Prime Minister of Canada after they flush Trudeau. I think it's going to be Mark Carney.
Well, you heard it first here on the Frankly Speaking. Mark Carney, after he destroyed England or the UK, as while the Bank of England, and now he's going to go do the final punch to Canada. Is that the plan? Deliver the final punch.
Well, yeah, he's going to, I think, oversee the blowout of the system, and he's going to be the technocrat. He's a very competent technocrat.
So absolutely. They all are. They're all smart. They're just not organic. Yeah. They're scripted, which means their true talent can never come.
Yeah. I mean, you have people like, I would say, lower level idiots like Justin or Biden who really can't be trusted to be left alone by themselves. Huh? Macron. Yeah. These are people who. Yeah, Macron is another example. These are people who are very handled, managed. They can't be trusted to be in debates or be outside of very controlled, scripted environments on their own. Whereas you have some of the more competent, vicious creatures, like I think Mark Carney qualifies, who do know how the game is played from the Byzantine structures a little bit more. He's much more vicious, much more cold, and in his understanding of the mechanics of the system. That I think that they want somebody like that in a command and control position in Canada going into the next wave of chaos, navigating through the storm that's going to get much, much worse if certain policies are not passed quickly that would deal with the tsunami that's coming on. And there are ways of doing that. There are ways that I hope Trump is able to. He said certain things about, for example, in 2016, he was talking about the need to restore a 21st century Glass-Steagall to break up the banks. He said that. Did he do it? No. I think he had too many Wall Street interests putting pressure on him to not do that. So he shied away from it.
His Treasury Secretary, and he's straight Wall Street. So that was never going to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, today worries me as well. I don't see the type of people around him who are being set up.
If there was a day that I wanted to stay in bed and never wake up, that's the day when he formed his cabinet. Let's talk about, I had a little bit of hope because my goal is really, let's just balance out. Let me throw Zelensky in there too, or as one of my favorite podcaster calls him, Zelensky. But I'm sure you know who that is. Alex Christoforous is hilarious.
Yeah.
So thing is,
Z is illegalized, right? You can't use Z in Germany anymore. It's,
I see, right? It's illegal. They're hilarious, these puppets. Yeah. So you have this cabinet, which is straight from Mossad, I think, AIPAC. what is going on? So let's stay with Biden a little bit more. So you got all these
Yeah.
puppets, moving around the faces. So we're recognizing
So
that they're realizing that those of us who are astute, because they're, the alternative media now is calling these people out. And they're like, no, we can't continue with this disgrace, incompetence as a mode, because they liked incompetence because they can be controlled more. But now they're like, well, no, let's put some smart people. So you think Mark Carney fills the spot, right? So we have Georgia Maloney, who's also smart, but I think she's also compromised. In Germany, who do you think they're going to replace Schultz with in Germany? As far as now that we're having more the smarter the upgraded version of these incompetent people.
I get the sense what they're trying to do right now is they're removing what dwindling little bits of sovereignty still existed within the European states is being moved towards the European Commission that's being beefed up under Ursula von der Leyen. And she's restaffed it with a lot of like Eastern European anti-Russian freaks from Estonia, Lithuania, who are being given like vast power representing the foreign policy of all of Europe. It's part of this whole, this United States of Europe, but under the control of this unelected bureaucracy that was started in a serious way with the Maastricht Treaty in 1992 that set up the foundation for the European Union, removing power to make decisions for yourself of what you're allowed to do economically or militarily from each individual nation. And increasingly, there's a push towards a greater degree of control economically. Mario Draghi, as well, just wrote a very important 400-page document calling for a green industrialization of Europe in order for them to compete with Russia and China. But when you look at his formula for the percentage of GDP of the European Union, he wants it 5%, 4 to 5% into a retooling and of largely state-driven enterprises, so like a nationalization, but under the interests of private corporations that would be managing it. So it's a PPP, public-private partnership, Mussolini corporatist model, where the private corporations take control of the government and then use their interests within the government to nationalize different things, but then done under also a Green New Deal orientation to focus on, cap and trade, carbon swaps, decarbonization policies, green energy grids that involve like a new type of colonialization of the Sahel that would have, solar panels all over the Sahara Desert to send electricity to Europe, things like that. Also a bit of nuclear. But all that to say, that's like a Mussolini fascist policy that Mario Draghi
Fascist,
is
absolutely
promoting.
fascist. And
Yeah,
we
and
get
Draghi
nothing.
was
We
very
get
close.
nothing. We're the serfs. We have nothing, no choice, no voice. They're
No.
gonna give us some kind of pseudo electoral process, and they're gonna say, just be happy. In Klaus Schwab's words, you will rent and be happy. Well, I will not be happy by your dictate. I will be happy by my own dictate. Call. So if you're listening to this, Klaus inviting you to come on the podcast. Let's talk. So that said,
So,
so we
so
have this disgrace of leadership. I call them misleaders of the world. They are just misleaders. They should never utter the word leader. They are not leaders. They are misleading us over a cliff. And if nobody sees it, just take a look at Haiti, and they've smeared that. We go back into Haiti, how they've turned that country into a gang territory. 70, 85% of the capital is controlled by gangs. We don't make guns. But so that's coming to a town near you, America and Canada, because they're importing the system here. They tried it out in certain places, and they're gonna do it. These places that they have all these like civil wars orchestrated. So let's keep talking about. So under the last 4 years, and of course I could have a Matt. He's my hero. I've wanted to have him on forever. I'm gonna have a little fangirl moment. I love Matt. He's so smart, so smart. There's so many dumb people on this planet, so I tend to select who I listen to, and he's one of my favorites. I just wanted to give you that little promo. As far as that's concerned, as far as what they're planning to do with this Green New Deal, and nothing is so green to me means prosperity, right? That's the color of, they say, if you look at the color themes, the rainbow, green is prosperity. You see the American dollar is green. There's nothing prosperous about this Green New Deal. As a matter of fact, it's going to destroy more than build, because what it's going to do is leave a few people at the top of the food chain, and it's going to leave us paying out of pocket, because they're going to be carbon credits, everything. And somebody came to me with a project, because I raised capital, ESG. I said, stay away from me. Anything ESG, you're talking about Larry Fink. So let's get into that character. And because how did he come into play in all of this? Who made him king? Mr. BlackRock. So let's talk about
Yeah.
how public-private partnership has been, and we've got to talk about Alinsky. So because he's all in on Alinsky, so let's bring Larry into this conversation. So we got Klaus, the castle characters, Klaus. We've got Larry, and we've got Alinsky, and who's wearing green, by the way. Alinsky
Yeah.
wears green every day. What is going on? He went to Notre Dame. He went to Notre Dame wearing his little green uniform. Come on, people. When does this stop? Go ahead, Matt. Tell me, what do you think all this what's the message here?
To answer your question in my way, I had made a reference to the speech that Mark Carney had given at
Mhm.
Jackson Hole at the Central Bankers Conference on 50 Shades of Green. And in it, he talks about the new system which is going to be created. And it sounded 2019 like the most absurd thing, and it still does. But people, at least now, can imagine how they're thinking more clearly than they could before COVID. And he talks about how the new system is going to redefine what is value in the behavior of money and investment. So he's basically saying on the one hand, and he's a former Goldman Sachs investment banker as well. He's not like somebody who's just a simple eco activist who became a
Mhm.
technocrat. He was a Goldman Sachs investment banker. That was his training, just like Mario Draghi. Both of them became central bankers in a certain way. What Mario Draghi in Italy, Mark Carney in Canada, and then in Britain. And both of them were in charge of the FSB. And I'm not talking about Russian intelligence, but the Financial Stability Board in Basel, which is sort of a sub branch of the Bank of International Settlements, which regulates international derivatives. So they both know how the derivatives time bomb, which is the time
They're
bomb,
all
it's the
corrupt.
derivatives.
They're all
Yeah,
corrupt.
they know exactly how it's wired. They were overseeing this time bomb, and so Mark Carney was talking about the two types of capitalists that exist, and how only one of them will be permitted to survive. And he describes how we have 50 Shades of Green in his, what he, I guess you could say, it's like a Benthamite hedonistic calculus of the 21st century. Jeremy Bentham being the guy who invented the hedonistic calculus as a way to sort of scientifically measure economic behavior based upon pleasure and pain. And Bentham
I
is a
was just
sicko.
about
Like
to
he
say, these
wrote
people
in,
have these fetishes that they're imposing upon
yeah.
us. Pleasure and pain. I think the fact that he named it the 50 Shades of means that he really enjoyed the 50 Shades of Grey. So I'm thinking that
Yeah,
was a
yeah. No,
particular.
it's an S&M thing. It's
Yeah,
an S&M thing.
truly
Yeah.
fetishes. These people, I'm going to call them
Yeah,
out. I think I want to do a psychological profile on all these people. What's their trauma? How far does it go back? When did you become a narcissist? That's my conversation for another show, but go ahead, Matt.
I think it's a worthwhile thing. The psychology of an oligarch. Like, yeah, what is the
They're
psychological profile of one of
psychopathic.
these freaks? How are they groomed, and how is their humanity
When did it
broken from
happen?
them?
When did it
Yeah.
break? When did it break? When did that part of them break? That emotional intelligence break, and they just went cerebral, and they started just thinking their way through life. Whereas humanity didn't matter; it was me first all the time. But I want to talk more about what you were saying about his speech, the 50 Shades of Green, which is a
Right.
fetish related. Because 50 Shades of Grey, if nobody's heard of that book, well, it's way back from the 2010s, I think it came out. But let's talk about his vision for the world, because these people are appointed for one country, but they become the face of the global cult, right? So Mark Carney is being
Yeah, yeah.
out to be the face of the global cult, anti-Trump. He's going to be like the opposition for Trump. Is that what it is? Is it because Trump said that
I,
Canada needs to be the 51st state?
I personally think, and they might have, because it does seem to me that they've just ousted Chrystia Freeland. It
I never
seems
thought
like
I'd
they're
see that
setting the
day.
stage. Yeah, it seems like they're getting ready to flush Trudeau. He's used up his he's like a Zelensky level person. He's like,
He's exceeded his allowance, as they say.
yeah, yeah. He's used up all of his assets. He's not useful on the game board anymore. So I do think that they're going to be flushing him. They might have Pierre Poilievre, who is he's the head of the Conservative Party. They might have
Huh.
him for a holding. Yeah, they might have him for a
Really?
holding
Is
pattern
he
for a period.
compromised too? Is he someone who's
Oh yeah.
also
I think
of the
he's WEF. However, at the same time, he has better authentic Canadian business interests who tend to support him and thus influence him, which
okay.
means that there's more for me to work with as a patriot in that camp than the current one, but I don't trust him at all.
None of them.
That being said, I think their ultimate goal is to bring in Mark Carney, whether that's right now quickly or whether it's after a period of a Pierre Poilievre conservative holding pattern for a short period and then bring in Carney. I don't know. But
So
that's what I
one
know for
question though,
um
is that what they're doing with Trump too? Is this like false kind of psyop that Trump is not real? He's also compromised. So as you say, the conservative is also, you just said that Paul
okay.
Poilier, is it Poilier or Poilier? I can never remember his name. Pierre.
Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah. So is that the same parallel that we're having in the US? If that's the
No,
case?
not exactly. Not
Okay.
exactly. Pierre Poilievre is, I think, a little bit more. Less of a sovereign entity than Trump can
Okay.
think for himself on a much greater degree than a Poilievre. But I do think Trump does have certain dangers. Number one being that I think, and actually, Whoopi Goldberg on The View gave a recent comment on this thing that's been a concern for me for some time, that a President Vance might easily be brought into play soon after the inauguration,
Here we
who's,
go. I
you know,
knew it. He's
yeah.
compromised for sure, without a doubt. I have said that loud and clear. I said I didn't know I voted for Trump.
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't have, I didn't, that's the thing. I wish I didn't have this superpower. I have a little superpower called something called, like my spidey sense, insight. I'm like, oh my God, he's compromised. How did Trump pick him? Then you see all the players. It's like Mossad 2.0, everyone is their allegiance. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna
I
start
mean,
before I get demonetized. Oh, I'm not, before I get strike after strike. It's one thing, it's the strikes. I'm not there yet, but I have to say, how much power do these people have? Why are they surround the whole cabinet, the whole Trump cabinet? We're talking about, first of all, Kushner, who is, I mean, that's the one I want to talk on air. Charles Kushner is like an indicted person who got pardoned, and now he's
right.
ambassador to France. What?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so the
Well, look,
whole cabinet.
yeah, there's so much compromise, right? So many weak spots. So and like I said, Whoopi Goldberg just made this comment. She said sorry for making it, but I think that it was speaking a little bit of truth there, saying that Elon and JD Vance might be playing a role in eliminating Trump. And she said to Trump, "I would stay away from staircases." Now,
I
again,
said that.
I think that the Peter Thiel, Elon
It's
Musk
so
asked.
clear. Shout out to Whitney Webb. It's so clear. We have to go
Oh,
offshore because
I was talking about I was talking about Whoopi Goldberg on The
I
View who
know
said
about
that.
Whitney Webb, who
Oh,
actually did a deep dive on Peter Thiel, and I'm sure you have too, and Milk
oh
has
yeah,
done it too. All those podcasters who have the courage to come out with this information,
yeah.
who don't care about the algorithm. So the thing is, so these people, so first of all, JD Vance comes out of nowhere. Who the hell is this guy? Who is he? Out of nowhere. And of course, he's a uniform. Then he has a film that nobody's heard of, Hillbilly Elegy or whatever it was, casted.
So here's the dangerous thing, right? Is that not only was he picked up by Peter Thiel's operation early on, and Peter Thiel is a cardboard
True.
cutout who's used
Into
by
this.
very very high powerful people. He's a member of the Bilderberger Group. He's a member of the
Is
Knights of
it?
Malta.
You mean Peter Thiel or JD Vance?
Peter Thiel.
Oh, Peter Thiel. Yes, yes, I knew that. But by
Yeah,
default, so it's JD Vance, I'm sure.
JD Vance is an asset of Thiel, right? Within
Of
Thiel
course he
Capital
is.
Management, Thiel's his primary financial backer.
I
He's
call you
been
out,
working
JD
on
Vance. You are not MAGA. I call you out. Send him that clip. He is not MAGA. Stop faking it. Because
you
we
know
have real issues in this country, in Canada. These people, I'm sorry, I'm going to go and rant. So these people who are pretending to be for the people. I don't think I think you define people, the people that you think you represent. No, you don't represent us. Because the thing is, I saw you start in Haiti. The reason why I'm so passionate about this, I've seen the destruction of that country, a sovereign country. You want the resources, and then you come out and say, we are going to keep America great. No, you're not. You come under the guise of pretending to be populist and MAGA. No, I'm somebody who grew up affluent. I don't give it. All right, this is a family-friendly show. This is for the sake of those people who believe everything Trump comes out of his mouth. Trump was compromised. They tried to kill the man. I don't even know if that's real. They try to kill him. Then JD Vance appears. Then out of nowhere, and everybody's including one of my favorite attorneys, which is what's his name? My goodness, he is on Viva's show, Barnes. Oh, what's his name? So anyway, he keeps talking about JD Vance, and I'm like, there's something off with this guy. I think he is in it. They couldn't achieve it with Pence. What they couldn't do with Pence, they're going to do with JD Vance. And the same thing they did with Kamala substituting for Joe, they're going to do with Vance. And I'm sorry, I'm sticking to that story. I may be wrong. I say to me all the time, prove me wrong. I want to be wrong because my hypothesis and my predictions are so dark that, sometimes I scare myself. But I say, prove me wrong, Matt. Prove me wrong, Matt. Tell me, give me some hopium, please.
well, no,
Um,
I mean I can't do that,
so
but
the
I can
but
what
go
I
back to
can
what
say.
Whoopi said. I'm sorry, I go on these rants, but What
No, I
did
mean,
more
but
people?
but I mean, she said what she said, right? But you brought up Larry Fink, you brought up, and I was talking about this. This all ties together, actually. It
Right.
does tie together. So Mark Carney's Fifty Shades of Green speech. Okay, let's do that as my branch point to tie this together. BlackRock. What does Peter Thiel represent? What does Elon Musk represent?
Ukraine,
BlackRock. So
Russia, China.
Ukraine, sure, yeah. So the idea that he put forth is that you have to imagine that all of the bankers using their new calculus for controlling what will be the new values of the new system that will be brought on after the calamitous collapse of the neoliberal model of globalization comes to an end. He's like, there's going to be a period of pain, and then we're going to have a new system that will have to define new sets of values that will define the behavior of what is money allowed to do, what is investment allowed to do, what, right? Very big God complex control freak. And he's like, okay, we're gonna use a sort of a scale of 50 different shades of green because everything has to be green. It's the green economy. So we'll say like it's gonna be brown on one side, and then from brown to green, bright dark green on the other side, green being the best. And we want to incentivize in every way possible through punishment and reward the behavior. So it's behaviorist of every player on the stage of the world to be as green as possible. And he describes how those companies that find themselves too much leaning towards the brown end of the spectrum either will have to change to become green or will cease to exist. Now, he's talking to not America, he's talking to the companies of the world.
The world.
And
It's
that's
a
a direct
global,
threat to basically say,
capitalist system.
yeah, and he's talking to, the Saudis are listening with Aramco. He's like, Aramco won't exist. Every company that does dirty things that produces carbon dioxide will not be permitted to exist.
There is nothing
So,
other than it's a parent-child relationship. So the parent gets to decide what happens, and you're subservient to that until you grow up. And the only way to grow up is to see through, to wake up. The only way to grow up out of the system is to wake up. But keep going. So that's the
yeah, and
system
they want to create a
the
society
vision
of
Mr.
broken.
Fetish has for the future. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Him and his wife, Diane Carney, who's also, I'm pretty sure they're both into some weird S&M stuff. But
Crazy.
she was a big controller of Justin Trudeau early on, back in 2003, even. But all that to say, so I think you had a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of the old school capitalists who recognized that they're going to be killed, they're going to be destroyed, and they moved to support Trump back in 2016. There's a
Mhm.
lot of clout there for explaining how Trump was able to emerge over Hillary Clinton. I
Mhm.
think that there's been a recognition that China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is based upon large scale thinking, building real investments in the real economy that's going to create billions and trillions of dollars for investors who are putting money into high speed rail networks, building up infrastructure, things like that. It's not just purely a simple state driven enterprise. It's a harmonization of national economics with a lot of entrepreneurialism, a lot, like it's quite a good marriage.
Great.
Yeah, and I think that Trump has spoken so highly of China's capacity to do good business, to build things, and I think his orientation has been to try to align the United States' interests and economic identity towards building things around the world with China as a friend, with Russia as a friend. He's given speeches on that regard. He brought the vice premier of China to the Oval Office in 2019 in May and basically said, hey, instead of putting all of our money, these hundreds of billions of dollars into weapons, how about we put that same money into building things that's going to be good for everybody? So I during that time, that first term that Trump was in office, this is why I do tend to like him.
I did too. I
He
didn't vote for him the first time. I did vote for him in 2020. I don't apologize for
I
that.
understand that. No, I understand that because he was an
I was a
anomaly. Like when he
libertarian. I voted libertarian in
Yeah,
2016.
right. So, I think that when I look at China in 2016, it had about 68 countries that had signed on to the Belt and Road Initiative. But throughout the four years that Trump was in office, it grew to 138 countries signed on to memoranda of understanding of countries in Africa, across Asia, across South America, the Caribbeans, who all signed on to the BRI while Trump was in office. So the reason for that is I think Trump created a space on the international stage of making it very, very very easy for China to do business relations with other countries that were formerly under the dominance of the iron fist of the United States. Once Trump was ousted under the 4 years of Biden, and this gets at your original question about, Trump and Biden, what's going on
Yep.
domestically and internationally, it grew zero. There was zero growth of countries aligned to China's BRI during the 4 years that Biden was re-empowering, reintegrating the CIA into conventional U.S. forces, which Trump had cut down with the help of people like Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who was brought in towards the very end, as well as the harmonization of U.S. military programs with Russia especially in the Middle East, and especially within Syria. So all of these things that Trump had done that were useful, on top of just undermining the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is sort of like a NAFTA of the Pacific, which was
Mhm.
designed to isolate China and to lock in all of China's Pacific allies or neighbors into a US-run free trade agreement that would put corporations over the power of sovereign nation states. Trump's first act in office was passing an executive order that destroyed the TPP and that created a space for China to build things like the regional economic partnership, which is the biggest free trade deal in history, with all of its allies in within the Pacific, some being Latin American. Australia was even brought in, which is good because it's tied to building
It's
real things.
absolutely
It's a
good.
totally different.
Competition
Yeah, it's not based on
is
speculating
good.
on. Yeah, you
Competition.
do.
This is what competition
Yeah,
is. And I want to
yeah.
point out that under Trump, there were some good things. I mean, he's a businessman. He's a transaction. He's more of a diplomat than these other people because they don't do business as diplomats. They do business as henchmen. They just go and execute and just say and threaten. So I do say that if Trump was there in 2021, they would have never dared to kill that Haitian president. Jovenel Moïse, I didn't like the guy, but he would have never died because that was definitely supported. I'm not going to say it was done by the US. What I'm saying is people who involved in that would have never dared under a Trump because Trump was not about, he's not out to kill anybody except Kulamani. He's proud to say the general Kulamani, we killed him, but he is someone who is more
So
about
many.
growth.
Yeah.
He said in a UN speech, "We are America first, and you should be interested in making your country your priority too." I will never. I think that was
Yeah.
2000. That was his first or second.
I've believed that. Yeah, I believe that for a long time, right? That every country should be Germany first, France first, like
Absolutely,
if every
Canada
Canada
first.
first, because and it doesn't mean everybody goes isolationist and we stop having international
Correct.
trade. It doesn't mean that at all. It just simply
Correct.
means that we all care about our interest and make
Correct.
trade deals with our neighbors or other nations based upon a consideration for our people's actual interest. And we should all be allowed to use protectionism to defend our interests while at the
Correct.
same time trading fairly with other nations that are on common ground. And where
Correct.
to the degree that you do that, it's good. You make good.
It is
It's like a
very
healthy
good.
version of globalization.
Absolutely.
Um,
It's good for business, it's good for humanity because the thing is, what you're going to have is people who are inspired to compete. And what do you do when you compete? You train to outperform someone else, not to impose just, dictatorship on someone else or just your authoritarian views on someone else, but to you look at something like, for instance, when I think about Haiti and they looked at the US and I think they would have been inspired to see, wow, they went free, we can go free too. Let's do that. That's it. You lead by inspiration. You don't lead by imposing and threatening. That's true leadership. So as far as what Trump was doing, he was coming from a worldview that this country's broken. I'm going to focus on this country, and you can go out and take care of your own. Except they saw that he was a threat to their new world order, and the new world order is not a theme just for one side. That's why I vote according to my sentiments, not by party. It's uniparty. And I'm sure it's that way in Canada because we touched a little bit about that because the conservatives and you saw it so blatantly in the UK with all the cast of characters from after David Cameron. That was a satire on steroids. So then you have people who don't put their country first. So we saw the administration, the Biden administration, that's what you were. The Biden administration was reverted back to the authoritative ways of diplomacy, not to discuss, not to negotiate, but just to tell the country this is how it's going to be. So you tell me, how can we come back from that? That's where we are now. Countries don't want to
yeah.
deal with the United States. We have countries who have been joining BRICS. How many countries now are members of BRICS? Under the Biden administration, everybody's jumped on board. Everybody's leaving the United States. So
Yeah,
we
well,
started maybe 5 countries, and are we at 20 now?
you have 9 full members, but then you have something like 20 partial members, right? People who will become members soon. Saudi Arabia being one of those big ones that we're just waiting to check off the final box. But yeah, you have, I think, like you were saying, it's a difference between building human relationships versus ideological projection. Biden and the neocons, who are all converging, as you said, in a uniparty, are all different flavors of the same ideology, different aspects of the same ideology. You're not dealing with humans who have
Yeah,
self-reflection,
right.
feelings,
You're right.
uh,
Absolutely.
empathy. Like that's not that's
It's
that
not,
might
they're
have been there
void,
when they
they're
were
robot.
kids.
I say to them, I'll take AI
Yeah,
over these dead, these corpses because they're just
you
pretty,
know?
they're dead. AI is more
Yeah.
coherent. I mean, I put a question into ChatGPT and it can answer me coherently. I bet you if I went to Macron, Trudeau, or, the one in, pick one, the one in Ursula, let's just go with Ursula. She's so robotic, that woman. I'm like, how is she even bleeding? But let me ask you, I get off on a rampage when these people, I don't understand how people just abide by the rules. Who's at the top of this food chain? I mean, do we even know them? Because it can't be these. Who is? I mean, although we mentioned the Rockefellers, the Rothschild, and all but who's really at the? We mentioned Larry Fink. Who is pulling the strings? I'm still trying. We talked about the Bank of for a settlement. What is it? International settlement. Who's there? Who's that Darth Vader figure?
I mean, you really want to go there? That's a whole
Yeah,
discussion. That's a
let's go
show
there.
to
I might have
itself,
to
man.
get this one off of YouTube and just go on Rumble.
I
But
mean, no,
we might use. Let's see
well,
how the algorithm reacts to this. But I've been outed already. They know I'm like, they know who I am. Because people know who my daddy was. Of course, I've been watched. I know you people, three letters, watching me and my family. So I don't care. Come for me. But anyway, go ahead. So who do you think is at the top of the food
well,
chain?
I guess here, look, from the way I tend to approach it, and I released a 3-volume book series this week called The Revenge of the Mystery Cults. And I just
Congratulations. Well
released,
done.
thank you.
Is
Thank
it
you.
on Amazon?
Yeah,
Where
so
can
it's
you find it?
yeah. People can access it on I guess the easiest way to find it is through my website,
Okay.
CanadianPatriot.org, and I'll send you the links to them.
But let's keep going because I'm enjoying this, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. You're gonna have to come back, but let's wrap up with what you think, where we are, who's at the who's at the top of the food chain. You got to give us that because I'm dying. Just give me a hint. Just you don't have to know exactly who. Just where do we go
Yeah,
if you want to
no.
go?
Look, I'll say it in a broad sense. So behind the to understand what BlackRock is, or Thiel Capital Management, or Tesla, or Starlink, or any of these, SpaceX. Like you look at any of these nominally private companies that are often tied, not always, but often tied to the big tech military industrial apparatus, because big tech comes out of the military industrial complex
Right.
of Silicon Valley. That's also where transhumanism
What is it?
was
Incu that VC that funds all of these people? Is it Incutel or
InQtel is the CIA venture
yeah?
capitalist front. Yeah, that was behind the creation of both SpaceX in 2003 as well as Palantir as sort of civilian fronts of all information awareness, total information awareness that John Poindexter, a major Straussian neocon, was assigned to set up, who was behind the creation of things like the continuity of government policy under Iran-Contra and the shadow government policy that Cheney advanced later on. That was what Poindexter was a part of. He was supposed to go to jail for it. Didn't actually go to jail for his operation under Reagan. But that's what he was doing with total information awareness, closely aligned with Dick Cheney and the Straussians. And when that got shut down, because people were a little bit too horrified with this all-seeing eye professing to like monitor your every thought and action, they're like, well, that's horrific. It was bad publicity. They had to like shut it down, and they rebranded it under Palantir. And so again, you got InQtel at the origin story of Palantir. You got it also at the origin story of SpaceX. You got it with the privatization, the undermining of NASA, and the transformation of old school national driven science on space, which used to be a national idea. It still is for China or Russia, but for America, they wanted to destroy that, castrate the United States as a nation by making it first dysfunctional as possible, hyper bureaucratic and absurd, which they did very well. And then they could make the argument, well, look how dysfunctional the nation state is doing things like advanced science. Wouldn't it be better if we had private billionaire capitalists doing it instead of the nation? Which was where things like Jeff Bezos's Blue, whatever it is.
Amazon and Mark
Well, yeah,
Zuckerberg.
Jeff Bezos has a space program. So does Elon. So does Branson. So does what's his name? Anyway, there's a variety of these billionaires. It's the new, so
So they're
that's
all
what they
made
started
men. As far
doing.
as I'm concerned, that's the mafia, just like they're made men. They make them
Yeah.
in mafia.
So
They're making
what they
this.
want to do, yeah, they tap these people, they get them to agree
They
to
are
become
brilliant. We're not dismissing the fact that these people have some capabilities and talents and some skills. I mean, to some extent,
maybe,
right?
I don't
They
even
have to
know.
be able
I'm
to
not even sold on that
regurgitate
anymore.
propaganda. They have to be able to at least regurgitate the propaganda. And so,
Yeah.
so they form these so they know they do surveys and they recognize, oh, this is what they want. Let's give them this. Let's give them a brown skinned guy called Vivek Ramaswamy, and and they were gonna give JD Vance with a brown skinned wife. Yeah, people, I said it. That's gonna give him and then it's like, I'm sorry, I'm just saying it, and he fits the bill. He called Trump America's mustache man. I mean,
Okay. Well,
you heard that
so
right?
yeah,
How do you
no.
go from that to being his bestie? I don't get it. I don't get it. Help me,
Yeah,
help me. I
well,
need an intervention
well,
because
they're trying to subvert. So I think what you have right now, going into the new, this transitions, I guess, to the discussion of going in. We're at the end of 2024, the opening up to 2025, going into the new Trump presidency, the good and the bad. I've established, and I think you agree with me, that overall we see that there's something viable and practical amongst Trump as a person who's got a tendency towards building relationships. He recognizes World War III is bad for business, would rather do things that involve finding common ground on economics and other things with other nations that his enemies would prefer to keep as our enemies.
absolutely. And the other thing,
Um,
Mac, is he has a base that actually calls him out on things.
so, well, yeah,
A
that's good
little bit.
too,
I would
right?
say one third of the MAGA base is a little bit more awakened than the other side, supposedly blurred side, that
Right,
gets
right.
no call out.
Okay.
They all are clapping. Let's go for 100 to the power of 100. So that's the
Okay.
that's the
I agree.
value on
Yeah.
the Trump side, because there is an awakened side that wants to actually see good for this country.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I definitely agree with you on that. And the best people I know
That would
are
be,
who are like,
I actually think I'm part of that, like, small
yeah,
percentage. And you, I mean, even though you're not American, and there's Mel, there are a lot of people who actually see through the nonsense. We may not be one third. Let's bring it down. Let's turn it down to maybe 10%. All right. So we'll just say
I think
10%.
overall you can do you it's important, right, to be able to support somebody but not be ideologically for everything that they do, to be able to have that honest self-criticism. That's what you need in life, right? You need to have support, but also you got to have, like, in friends, good friends challenge each other. They try to bring out the better side of each other, and they call out bullshit when they're being, they're
Completely,
self-deceiving, you know?
complete
That's
bullshit. For
yeah, you
instance,
know,
Vivek Ramaswamy said, and his dream team, right? He said he
yeah.
cried during January 6th when he watched it on TV. And I'm like, first of all, that's what you have tears for? You don't have tears for when you hear kids like starving or, homeless veterans. You don't cry for that. But then January 6th is
No.
when you decided to shed tears. All right. Was that on demand? So so
Yeah.
the
Well,
they're not going to be the ones telling Trump, make America first. That's my concern. So when you talk about Elon
no,
Musk
I
and Vance as another kind of team, are we saying, I keep digressing. I have so many questions for you. You can tell my enthusiasm and my passion for these topics that I've been censored, and I've been censoring myself, but I feel somewhat unleashed with you because I know you are too. You're a free thinker. So I will let you go ahead and tell the audience. And we've been going for a little bit, and you just want to tell us the main points of what we should be watching for going into 2025, the new administration, because we know we could scrap the last 4 years. We've had more wars. We scrapped Syria. We didn't even touch on Syria. You want to touch a little bit about Syria and what you think happened there? The fact that they put a terrorist in charge, who has a bounty on his head for $10 million, and he's on the throne.
I suspect there's a few hypotheses that I'm toying with, and I don't have a solid take on it. There's, on the one hand, I lean towards the hypothesis that it was a trap to sabotage Trump from
Yeah,
Blinken and company. I lean
absolutely.
towards that. Now, other people, like a friend of mine, Vanessa Bailey, who's lived in Damascus for many years, she recently had to leave. She's of the view that a backdoor deal was struck between Putin and Trump to agree to sort of trade Ukraine for Syria. I don't tend to believe that, but I'm open to the
And what would that
possibility.
mean, trade? So they would find truce in Syria, they would get a peace treaty,
Yeah,
or a
like Putin
ceasefire.
would agree to accommodate the things log and has put forth as some of the deals to de-escalate, Ukraine, which is not a very good deal. Like I read the General Kellogg propositions, and they're not good. it's basically saying, okay, we agree to the territorial consignments of Donetsk and Crimea staying Russian, but at the same time, we do want to give the rest of Ukraine the right to join NATO, which is still, and nothing is dealt with the neo-Nazi problem, nothing. So I don't think that that's a very good deal.
Or nor the biolabs.
Or the biolabs, right? That's not taken care. That's not brought up in the negotiation.
No.
So yeah, like that has to be dealt with. Same thing for Georgia. Now in Georgia, it does seem like you have a strong conservative government which has just taken power around Georgia Dream, which has been able to suppress the regime change that was going on up until a week and a half ago. There was a very big danger of Georgia toppling, which also has a lot of U.S. biolabs, by the way. It's Ukraine and Georgia. Georgia's also in the heart of Eurasia, right? So the rail lines that go down from Russia into Iran pass through Georgia. If that blows up, that disrupts a big part of the Eurasian alliance: Russia, India, China, Iran, which is the backbone. So that's a stabilizing factor, which is good. Putin has in his recent address to the people, it's a 4.5 hour off the cuff.
The Q&A he just recently did this week, yes.
Yeah, he did mention that with Trump coming in, he is going to be more than happy to open up a variety of discussions around resolving the Ukraine conflict. I'm curious to see what that
when you're
is.
speaking to an adult versus speaking to children. So yeah, I could tell the conversation can be very different.
Yeah. Now,
But
that
my
would be
concern is with all of that is they've got to take. I mean, that Newland woman in the State Department, she's not going away so quickly. She is obsessed with
no,
Ukraine.
she's got to be fired and then put in jail, but I don't know how
Doesn't
that's going to
matter
happen.
if
All I have to say,
fired.
the
That's
firing the firing the
she's
firing
not
seems
walk
easy.
among us.
Uh
I don't think this woman's going to go away
yeah.
that easily. She put a lot into Ukraine, and I'm not
Yeah,
even saying
well, she'll have
just
to be.
Newland.
I
Let's
think
just
I
call
think
her
they'll flush
Newland.
her pretty quick.
You think?
She'll
Well,
probably take a Freeland.
she
Yeah, if Trump's in
between
there, I
her
think
and
I think she'll go the
Freeland,
way that
Freeland and Newland,
she'll
that's
go
like
the
a
way.
dream team.
Yeah, I know that's why. So Freeland was ousted so quickly, and I say
Right,
ousted. I don't think she actually resigned. I think she was told you're being taken out of play. You're
right.
not useful anymore. You were useful to the degree that we were putting all of our forces behind the Ukrainian card
Mm-hmm.
against Russia. Now we're not doing that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she's being removed from the game board. I think Newland
Mm-hmm.
as well will have a similar fate.
So we need to
Doesn't mean
tell
that
the
there's
audience who these people are. So we have the finance minister in Canada who just resigned, and we are
yeah,
assuming we have no facts that she was removed versus resigned. And then we have Newland, Victoria Newland, who's in the State Department. I think she's a deputy. She was a deputy head. I think she had resigned from that post a while, but she's been on back manipulating from the behind. But those two people have Ukrainian ancestry, I believe, and they were very obsessed with that whole project. So they're all in. They're all in. And so in order for anything to be resolved, they would need to be definitely neutralized. And I say neutralized, meaning have no communications with people on the ground in Ukraine in order for any kind of peacekeeping to happen. So let's just talk about, so who do you think it's, because Israel's is like, taking up, inching its way into occupying. Israel is taking up territory. They're taking up land. They're moving in the territory. And it's interesting that the ex-Al Qaeda guy has no problem with that. The ex-Al Qaeda leader,
yep,
he's got no
yeah,
problem with the Jewish
Jolani,
state coming
yeah.
in, coming into his territory. Nothing to see there. Nothing, no problem. All these issues that you guys went to couples therapy for, it's all resolved. Yeah. So Israel now in the Arab
Yeah, no,
state,
I
all
know.
good. Yeah, we're
So
gonna
that's the
live
thing.
happy.
So here, let me recap the three hypotheses. Is number one, this is done to sabotage the incoming Trump
Mhm,
administration and enmesh him in an unnecessary conflict, which I
mhm,
lean towards. Number two is this is part of a backdoor pragmatic deal to try to like buy a little bit of leverage over Ukraine and maybe Georgia and
mhm,
sabotage Assad and the Syrian people as a
mhm.
temporary cold geopolitical practical decision, which is possible, but I don't buy that yet. The other one is a little bit more hopium, but I still have to entertain it, which is the Alex Craner approach, which I like his hypothesis. I like his lines of reasoning, which is that Russia set a trap to
Mhm.
pull in the entire Al Qaeda complex into, which can't really form a government. They don't have competence, into a wasting war. But that again, it seems a little overly optimistic because
That's
I
quite
see right now the danger, and we're going to see when this thing airs what the world's going to look like. But
Mhm.
the danger now that you have Al Qaeda affiliated groups, including Jabhat al Nusra, HTS, in a dominant position, you have Israel encroaching more and more, securing the Golan Heights, even preparing to go deeper into Syria that they
Syria.
perceive as
Mhm.
mostly all the right of Greater Israel to control. We're going to see very soon what's going to happen to Lebanon, to Jordan, to Iraq, because these are fragile countries. To Africa,
Correct.
like right now, we know that there's African, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, that have seen nationalist military leaders kick out the French, the American military, mining
Absolutely.
interests. Like, it's quite amazing what's been happening since 2022. But at the same time, to counteract their positive actions in resisting the international imperialists, there's been a massive increase of Boko Haram,
Right.
various Al
In
Qaeda
Nigeria.
affiliates in Africa to destabilize them. We know that what's
So
the
just to ask,
Ibrahim
Boko Haram,
Traore.
are you think they're also assets of our intelligence?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, there's been incredible work by gray zone journalists documenting exactly how they're directly deployed by Western intelligence agencies to destabilize governments that
Yeah.
they're
Just
very
like the
closely tied to
gangs
Al
in
Qaeda.
Haiti and Hamas, everybody has a little bit of intelligence in their pocket. That's or in their toolbox, let's just say.
Yeah.
But let's keep going.
So
So let's talk about,
so
let's
this
summarize.
there's a destabilization there.
What should Trump think about? What should Trump think about? What are the top hot topics for Trump going into the administration?
I think it's World War III number one. He's got to create.
Oh, I
He's got
want
to
some
go back to the
hope, man. World War III is still there. We're still working on World
yeah.
War III. I thought that was it,
Well, yeah.
I'm kidding. Of course it is.
So hopefully, I mean, he needs to get a dialogue with Russia and China as partners in a reorganization of the system, which is going to be collapsing soon. So we got to get competent, like an actual coalition of sovereign nation states, having a dialogue around protecting the people and the nations from the blowout of the global derivatives bubble and the chaos, the destruction of supply chains that will emerge.
And
He's
we
got to
didn't
get
even talk
a
about the devaluation of the dollar.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, the dollar's going to go into a mixture of. I mean, it's already been going through both like there's both inflation and deflationary aspects of the crisis, but I think we're going to see a hyperinflationary blowout at a certain point sooner than later. That's going to be another challenge Trump is going to have to deal with. On top of the fact that, I don't know how they're going to resolve the debt ceiling currently. That, like, he's talking about eliminating the debt ceiling, but most of the debt is weaponized debt that can't be paid in a billion years. So it has to be reorganized the way it was done in the 1930s under the New Deal. Break up, for example, do an audit of the banks, figure out what aspect of the banks is salvageable and what is not. And do what was done under Glass-Steagall, under the Pecora Commission in 1933-34, to really do a systemic surgery. You got to do that. And everyone's afraid of having that conversation because the Wall Street bankers, they think, are too powerful. But it's like,
Yeah.
they're bankrupt. Think about, they seem powerful now, but look ahead a little bit, 2 seconds in the future, in the historic time, scheme, they're bankrupt. So
Right.
you want to die for them, sacrifice us for them, or
Right.
actually deal with it now before it kills? So, like, I think that if the more sane business interests who are not into the transhumanist agenda are able to exert their clout, and I think that they are there around the Trump groupings, they're not all bad, then we could see a serious discussion around a new Bretton Woods, like a new conference like what happened in 1944, where you had a bunch of countries come together to set up the foundations for a new economic architecture. But that
Mhm.
has to be one that's not based upon an empire, which is what we did after World War II, which was, hegemony. So this has to be based upon looking towards, like, Russia's offers to build Arctic
Mhm.
development. China is looking at the Arctic with the Polar Silk Road too. Canada and the United States are Arctic powers that could build tons of infrastructure, access all sorts of mining resources that would be in everybody's interests.
Right. But he has
Africa
to
right
prove
now.
that these agreements that he's setting up will be upheld, because right now the faith of the global community with the United States has just failed, because they pretty much reneged on every. I mean, what's happening with Russia has proven that even if you sign an agreement, it could just be torn
Yeah.
away and torn up, and pretty much you're back to square one. So how does he address the? How can I say? I mean, if you look at just the Minsk one and two, people are now hesitant to try to take them at their words at face value. But also the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Trump is talking about eliminating, the bureaucracy of the United States, but also he's talked about eliminating their relationship with the UN and some of these international, the WHO, the World Health Organization. Talk to me about that. Is that something you think will happen?
I hope so. I mean, he talked about that in his first term. Had he been permitted to enter into a second term in 2020, the U.S. would have been out of the WHO. He exited from the Paris climate deals, which I hope he gets back on top of that exit once again, because Biden enmeshed the U.S. back into it.
What about the
Yeah, that would
UN?
be.
the United Nations.
Yes.
Because he
So
has said that they are the ones that are behind this whole border issue.
well, here's the irony. Like my wife just made a film
Tell
that we
you,
we
tell the
just
audience your
released.
wife's name is Cynthia. Cynthia Chung, isn't
Yeah,
it?
Cynthia Chung. She did something on the Phoenixing of America, going through Brett Weinstein and Eric Weinstein and their role in driving the U.S. towards civil war and chaos. Because Eric,
Really?
yeah, oh yeah, it's a full length document. It's a hardcore
Is it on
documentary
your
on Canadian
website?
Patriot. Yeah, it's on the website
Okay, I'll
canadianpatriot.org.
take a look at it. I have not heard that version of
And yeah,
their
basically, it's
their
through the work,
role.
the research of Johnny Vedmore assisted immensely at pointing to the fact that it was Eric Weinstein who was working for the UN as a contractor in 2002 when he was still tied to Peter Thiel, or he still is today, but he was just beginning at that time his career with Peter Thiel in drafting the UN's weaponized immigration policy. So he's actually the author of the UN's weaponized mass immigration policy. It's Eric Weinstein who's behind that
I did not
program.
know that.
Yes. And then his
So
brother is also playing a role in helping to refocus or redefine what is behind
I
the
always get them
weaponized.
confused. Eric is the venture capitalist, isn't he? And Brett
Yep.
is the, Ivy League professor.
Darwinian evolutionary biologist. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I always get them confused. Yes. So I'm more familiar with Eric, my being my finance background, and I just
Yeah.
didn't, so
Now
these people are very.
they're both part of this operation that came out of these cyberneticists in Silicon Valley, these transhumanists that set up something called Game B. So Brett Weinstein is a co-architect of Game B, which is sort of a controlled opposition to the collapsing neoliberal model. And he was years ago already a part of this thing. His brother seems to have been a part of this thing. It was run by
Really?
this cyberneticist that was a big part of the creation of the counterculture named Stuart Brand
Do you know
and a
how they're
bunch of
being sold
behavior.
to us? Well, at least
Yeah.
Eric, I mean, he's rebranded as this, like anti-establishment, character because he was all in on RFK. Of course, RFK joined and we haven't even talked about him. He joined the Trump team, and so everyone who's associated with RFK is now a kind of sort of MAGA populist. But I always had my suspicions about them.
Yeah, like part of what caught, and this is what the documentary starts with, is the anomaly of Brett Weinstein's speech at there's a Saving Our Republic speech that he was giving. He was giving a presentation to before Trump was elected, where he calls for phoenixing our republic, saying that America's new origin story has to be based upon the story of the phoenix, and that just like the phoenix would light its nest ablaze and start anew,
Right.
so must Americans who are patriots light their nest ablaze and phoenix their republic. And he said, like, in the words of Benjamin Franklin, not really. What did we have? A republic if we can phoenix it. So he's basically calling not so subtly for a chaos operation where they want order out of chaos. And then when
Well,
you
this
look
is
at
the
the
Great
operation,
Reset, though, isn't it? It's a Great Reset in
yeah,
essence.
yeah, but with
This
a bit
is
more of a conservative flavor
phenomenal.
to it. So, you'd have, you look at Palantir and Peter Thiel's investments into these, like, what looks like 15-minute cities across Latin America, these Bitcoin freedom cities, Prospera, which they want to create, which again, they're pretty much like 15-minute cities, but they accommodate a more Christian conservative profile, but they're the same thing. Everything's controlled. The Tesla automobiles that they want to bring about as the new electric cars can be all deactivated remotely. They can all be tracked, traced. It's 100% controlled not by the people who are driving it, but by control centers that can monitor your behavior, what you search, right? Things like that. So it's part of this fake opposition that they're trying to co-opt the Trump administration and bring it into something a lot more technocratic, kind of like what Elon Musk's grandfather was doing, Joshua Haldeman was doing when he was running the Canadian branch of Technocracy Inc. back in the 1930s and 40s. That Technocracy Inc. didn't go away. That became at the heart, that went into the creation of Silicon Valley, and that it was, that was what they wanted to do. And he went to jail for it in the 1940s. He went to jail because it was a little bit too pro-fascist. That's Elon Musk's grandfather. And then when he got out of it, he got out of jail. He then went to South Africa,
So
set up the
informative.
Elon Musk. Huh?
This is so informative. I mean, I feel
Yeah,
like, we've been going for an hour and a half. So I feel like this is going to be a two-part. We're going to do this in two parts, but I want to have you
sure,
back. So, and,
sure.
and of course, you could tell me, you're giving me so much information. You've given me permission to come out from the shadows myself, from the shadows of information. So, Matt, let's wrap this up because I could go on and on, but I don't want to overload
Right.
the audience. Of course, you're going to come back 2025. We've got Peter Thiel. So the dream team, we've got Peter Thiel heading this, he's got everybody, because he's donating to all these people, Marco Rubio, all these people, all these, and we didn't even touch Marco Rubio. He's the guy, really? Anyway, and so what should Trump first do? What's his priority? I know you said World War III, but where should all his energy be? And everything else can wait except you say, is it World War III, which means
Yeah,
negotiate with,
I
talk
think
to Russia.
he's got to do two things at the same time, which is number one, yeah, have serious adult conversations with the leadership of Russia and China around points of common interest. Number two, he's got to deal with the economic collapse of the American banking system, which involved he was on the right path in 2016-17 when he was talking about reviving Glass-Steagall to break up the banks, sort out the good from the bad assets. He's got to bring that back fast as a conversation,
Hopefully he
and
can.
his supporters need to support him because if he can't do it by himself. He needs a big educated support base who can give him the education but the support he needs for that
The
to happen. Because there's a
information.
lot of powerful interests that want to eliminate that from permittable discussion. Number two, protective tariffs. That's good. Like he's talking about it, but it has to be done in a non-destructive way. You can't just put blanket 100% tariffs on Chinese goods. You're gonna undermine the faith internationally that's already dwindling to
Well,
death
that you
of
mentioned
the U.S.
when it comes to China, it's Steve Bannon, who is a very solid advisor. I know he was fired, but still in Trump's camp. So Steve Bannon is someone who's completely anti-China. I mean, he says he's anti-CCP, but at the moment, CCP is the one, leading. So anti-CCP is anti-China right now. So that's going to be hard because, Steve Bannon has Trump's ear.
Yeah, but I think Trump has been pretty wise so far to keep him at arm's distance. Like he flushed Bannon weeks after he was first elected and kept him at a far distance because I think he recognizes that Steve Bannon is a highly compromised character who's locked into the worst elements of China's deep state, like Miles Guo. Bannon is totally enmeshed in the Miles Guo operation, who's a sociopathic, former billionaire from China who's trying to organize an international shadow government of Chinese expat fools who will be used to overthrow China. Also, the Falun Gong, which is sort of an Asian version of the Scientology cult, but an Asian version of the same thing. That's run by the CIA. They're also an alien cult, just like the Scientologists who believe in, a global alien conspiracy of the CCP representing the bad aliens, and we're working with the good
Right.
aliens, and they want to
I
steal our
think humans
bodies.
are doing just fine being
Huh?
bad on their own. I think humans do
Yeah.
just fine
So
by
Steve
themselves.
Bannon is yeah, Steve Bannon, he's so locked into this thing. I hope that Trump keeps his policy of keeping that guy at a distance because he's also given a speech to Trump just recently where I was listening to it where he was saying, "Look, China and the US together can save the world." And I that was a recent speech. He just gave this a few days ago. So I do think his orientation is still pragmatic cooperation even though he'll use harsh language that is ugly to the ear. He'll
Mhm.
usually do things that involve something very competent on matters of US China relations generally. COVID
Mhm.
did screw that up, but
I
I
mean,
think
it's
that
common
could come
sense,
back again.
right? Trump is a
Yeah.
common sense guy. So he's
Yeah.
doing the common sense
Exactly.
thing. So as far as Steve Bannon,
Yeah.
I like Steve Bannon, except when he starts ranting about China. So I like his information. He's an ex-investment banker. He was a, Goldman Sachs guy, and he's come out, but everybody has their stuff. So he goes to his masters like everybody does.
Well,
I have none, and so he knows who pays, I don't know. I'm assuming he has strong because the end of his podcast ends with some guy on a boat. I think that's who you're referring to. But and so I say that to Steve. He's a smart guy. He has good information on finance, and I appreciate that. But as far as the China bit, I definitely turn him off. So that said, we have been speaking for some time. We could go on and on. You're gonna come back when Trump gets in? Can you come back?
I Sounds good. Yeah, sure.
All right,
Absolutely.
perfect. So tell the audience where we can find you, your books, and how much you love, because you're in Montreal. What's your favorite Haitian restaurant if you've been to any? And so I'm not been. So tell us where to find you, where to find your books, what's the latest book that you release, and your social media handles.
I have been to a couple of Haitian restaurants, and I'm terrible with names. There's a good Creole place in Villeray. Ah, God, I'll have to get back to you. I'll come back with a prepared
Okay,
answer on some
next
good
time.
choices of food for Montrealers. or people passing through Montreal. Yeah, this was fun. If people want to pick up my books, like I said, The Revenge of the Mystery Cults, Volume 1 to 3 is now available as of this week on Amazon paperback. Some are hardcover and digital, so those are there. Clash of the Two Americas, Volume 1 to 4, the Science Unshackled book that I recently did, Untold History of Canada, Volume 1 to 4, are all available on CanadianPatriot.org. Also, RisingTideFoundation.net has a lot of material that my wife and I pulled together. It's more educational, cultural, but really, really intellectually stimulating stuff. So RisingTideFoundation.net. And
Share the
finally,
wife's name again for the audience so they can.
Cynthia Chung. Yeah. And recently we've begun making films with a very talented filmmaker named Jason Dahl, who's up in the Yukon, and he's got so much talent, and we just hired him, and we've been working with him to turn a lot of our research into films, which people can find also very easy all over the Canadian Patriot website. So yeah, and lastly, I guess my Substack. So if people want to support the Substack work, they can get free stuff and extra material for paid subscribers, and that is matthewehret.substack.com.
Well, fantastic.
Thank you
Of
for
course,
the
we're gonna put
plugs.
all his links. And it's been a pleasure, as usual. See, I told you I had the best. Isn't it great? See, you know I love to talk. If I actually stop to listen to someone, it's good. I hope you enjoy this. This is a Frankly Speaking with Sendra D show. I love you so much, and I hope to bring you more and more of this content in this new year of 2020. The new year coming, 2025. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what your comments are. If you have any questions for Matt, what you'd like Matt to, because we did a sort of compressed version of his brain. But now let's see what you want us to flesh out, different topics, different headlines. Get ready, people. 2025 is going to be an amazing year in the good and the bad. So stay strong, stay steady, and stabilize. We're ready for this. So thanks again for watching, and have a wonderful day. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Always, I love your support, and I love you being a part of this community.
Oh, and don't forget, subscribe to Frankly Speaking with Sendra D's podcast and join us every week as we uncover the stories of those who triumphed over life-altering challenges to achieve not just financial success, but a richer, a deeper, a more altruistic life. It's about time we redefine what it means to be a truly affluent individual. Don't you agree? So come and join me. And let's be unstoppable on this journey called life. Because here, I to waking up to your authentic being.